we're going to play a couple of Ram Dass pieces, short pieces that address the theme of this retreat around finding balance in the sacred. And so let's just play those first, and then we'll introduce Sharon.
We're going to experience a homecoming. I'll tell you, I experienced that as I keep opening my heart and accept my part in the sea of humanity, in the process of it, and start to allow that quality of compassion to come forth, and the kind of that quality, I experienced the feeling of coming home. I feel like I come home into family. I come home into place. I come home into the harmony of things. I think that the conditions are available for us to feel that feeling. And I think as each individual feels it, then they become an instrument through which others feel it. I think it is a heart-to-heart process of coming home into that feeling of being at home. Because the statement, like I remember being in a motel on tour. I had been on tour for about 6 months. And I was in a motel, and after that, a few later, I was going to go back to a place that was my base camp, that was sort of my apartment. And I thought, I came in and I sat down in this, I don't know whether it was a Motel 6 or a Ramada Inn or something. It was a plastic place with predictable qualities to it. And I sat down and I thought, only 2 more weeks, then I can go home. And then I thought, isn't that a bizarre concept? Why aren't I home now? Because since I'm on the road most of the time, I'm always I'm not being home. So I got up and I walked out of the motel door, closed the door, I walked down the corridor, and I came back and I opened the door and I yelled, I'm home. You know that feeling of I'm home? And I came in and I said, I'm home in the universe. If I'm not home now, when will I be home? And it did something to my consciousness. And I must say, I experienced that I am at home on earth. And then behind that, I experienced I am at home in the spirit. And as I sit with this woman with cancer and I fall in love with her, it's not fall in love like possessive. At the same moment, I allow my emotional heart to open, as well as that deeper quality of unitive love. And I realize that because I'm really opening to this woman, I'm going to miss her when she dies, and I'm going to feel terribly sad, and I'm going to grieve. And I can feel my fear of the anticipatory grief wanting me to close down a little bit from her. And then I realize that unless I let my heart break again and again and again, I'm never going to get fed, nor am I going to feed anyone else. But you can only let your heart break again and again and again when your identity is not an identity with your heart. With your emotional heart, I'm talking about, your romantic emotional heart. She left me, that one. So as you and I stretch our consciousness to acknowledge that who we are is much more than we thought we were, and even allow the possibility that who we are is formless while who we think we are is form, and play with that stuff. And as that gets more real for you, at first the launching pad is on earth, and you get high and you come down and you say, was that real or was it crazy? It was church-induced. Got to be careful. But after a while of just like acknowledging and opening and allowing, you find your base camp is shifting. It's shifting from here to there. It's what Christ said, you are in the world but not of the world. And you begin to stand somewhere else. And then, of course, you see that you can't stand anywhere. And you got to be everywhere all at once and nowhere. Very simple to me. You do need to embrace paradox in mysticism, which is a tough problem for the mind. It's where it has to surrender to the intuitive heart. And at that point, you start to open up to how much you love all forms. The love is so powerful, you can hardly bear it. It is so powerful and precious. And at the same moment, you are not averting your gaze from what is. And it's extraordinary when in the midst of what is, which is all of it, it's the newborn baby, it's the first rose, it's the smell of spring, it's the fear of pain, it's dying, it's the separation and loneliness of generations, it's the breakdown, it's all of it. It's a crack person stealing because of the addiction. Oh boy, it's all of it. It's all, when you open to how it all is, and the rainforests and the rivers and the air. And you say, yeah, yes, it's the way it is. And you see the horrible beauty of form, the horrible beauty. And you love it. There is such an embrace of it all. You become it and it becomes you. Gandhi said, when you surrender completely into God, you find yourself in the service of all that exists. All that exists. It becomes your joy and recreation, or joy and recreation. And when you can trust that truth of your deepest being enough, because you've reflected and you've allowed it to come in, you've sat with silence and quietness and looked in and felt this. You felt that the universe is a universe of law and it's all unfolding, not man-made law, but just there is there's an order. It's not a rational order. It's what the Chinese call the Tao. It's the way of things. And there is a harmony in that way of things, and it includes life and death and cancer and AIDS and winning at the lottery, and it's all in there. It's all part of the unfolding of the law. And you're so appreciative of having the opportunity, as Rilke said, to see behind the billboard at the edge of town, to see the mystery for a moment. But you come back, if you even mention the mystery to people that are taking it seriously, it's like Plato's cave. They stone you to death. They crucify you, which is what they did on Easter. But you up-level them. You say, I'll drop back in 3 days and show you it's a hype. That was a very cool maneuver from a relieving people of suffering. Because see, that said, look, it isn't how you think it is. And the minute you allow the possibility that that's a true story, and I know because I hung out with yogis in India, that's obviously true. I mean, miracles are just things you don't understand. I mean, there is much part of the Tao and the way of things than anything else. But if I can perform an act that shows you that you, and I say, I'm just like you, and you see I am, I bleed when you stick a sword in my side. And I say, I'm just like you, and I don't think all this is real, and I'll show you. And you love me, so your heart is open to me, and you get shown, and something says, wow, that's true. Well, if that's true, I'm not who I am. What happens to your life after that? You are, at that point, not caught in the melodrama that your mind keeps creating. In that moment, you are free of suffering. So his act frees you of suffering. That's how that works, and it works. If you can buy it, you got it. If you say, well, I don't know, forget it. We'll wait another 10,000 incarnations. See, that's the fun of it. There's no rush.
and Ram Dass speaking to embracing it all, particularly those words he lived, certainly after his stroke and when his last years in Maui, he really did embrace it all. I mean, just amazing. And created an example of being at home with whatever he was encountering. It was, both of those things were supremely important to us as he reflected them to everybody who was around him. And it's really the essence of how we engage around balance and taking those examples. We need to bring Sharon in. So Sharon Salzberg is somebody that has been close to us, as close as you can get, over all these many years, and really embodies Bhakti and Buddhism intersection. She is our embodiment of that. Sharon Salzberg.
Hello.
Thanks for being here, Sharon.
It's a great delight to be with you all.
And you want to say hello, David?
Hi, Sharon.
Hi, David.
How you been?
I'm good. How are you? In Boone. You all in Boone.
Yeah, Boone.
Yes, we've been enjoying our Sangha Spring Washam. Just did a talk earlier and talked about the 3 refuges and particularly emphasized Sangha, which is what we have been doing for many years in these retreats. That's the most important part that people can take home. But I wanted to just talk about with both of you a couple of things that really, again, point to finding balance and finding harmony. And we've been doing, Sharon, we've been doing some good meditations. David led a wonderful meditation yesterday and Spring this morning. So we're increasing the practice quotient, I think. So that's been good. I wanted to just bring up a couple of things around compassion and around kindness. And I think Spring mentioned earlier, His Holiness, or we've spoken to it, I guess, over the last couple of days, talks about my only religion is kindness. And there's a real reason for that. I just want to quote from a podcast that I did earlier with a woman named Lisa. The minute I began to welcome my unwanted guests with kindness, all the dark thoughts, etc., that we all have day to day, sending metta toward each thought, feeling, and corner of sadness in my heart, that's when I felt the real taste of healing in my life. Meeting what is present with kindness teaches us the profound lesson of letting go into our human experience, even into all of the unwanted stuff. Ultimately, it gives us the resources of compassion, big-heartedness, and we'll say also His Holiness quotes all the time, warm-heartedness, I love that, and inclusivity. So much so that I've come to call self-kindness a practice of radical inclusion. Great quote. Can you comment, both of you?
Yeah, well, I think that's actually the secret ingredient of mindfulness. Like when we say we're being mindful of our experience without judging, without condemning ourselves, and all of that. What does that imply? First of all, that's not that easy. And second of all, it implies a kind of basis of presence that's infused with, as Ram Dass would say, loving awareness. And I've seen people try to reframe the word mindfulness a lot these days. They say it sounds so cold and so clinical unless you actually know what it means. And some people say, let's call it kindfulness or warm mindfulness or heartfulness or and again, there was Ram Dass who really emphasized loving awareness, and that's the whole point. It's got to be in there, otherwise we're on the same train of self-judgment we're used to, and it's not really the same.
Yeah. Dave?
So I just want to tell a very short story about Sharon and me.
Oh, okay.
Well, first of all, she married my son, and I hope you don't take that the wrong way. She officiated the wedding.
That also could use an addendum since they're no longer together.
Yeah, disappointingly for me, but because that would have been amazing. But Sharon, in our world, which is the formal Tibetan Buddhist kind of lineage and progression, for us, for my community, she holds a very special seat that I just want to acknowledge going forward, which is she's the throne holder of the metta tradition as far as Dharma Moon is concerned. We use her books when we're teaching on that topic. And I consider, metta in the Tibetan tradition is related to, but more Tonglen and the kind of compassion practices are probably emphasized more. So when I wanted to present these teachings, I basically brought on Sharon in my heart and mind as our guru for this. So I just want to acknowledge that. And then a short story, which is she came to, I think, a Shambhala center and was giving a talk, and I drove you home that night. I don't know if you remember this or not.
You were my driver for many, many an occasion.
Yeah, we've had some real good road trips together. But we were talking about, metta. Do you all know metta, that practice? How many people have never heard of metta or loving kindness? Okay, so Sharon will give you a little bit of a heads up on it when we continue. But it's a practice of sending out 4 wishes or many wishes to other people for their benefit. May you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be at ease. And you just repeat that or contemplate that. And it kind of it's like putting water through your plumbing, and it just cleans it out, and you just find yourself having those thoughts and feeling that way. So I was driving her home in the city, and we pulled into a street, and there was, in New York, they have garbage trucks, and they just park in the middle of the street, and so I'm going, okay, we're going to be here for 15 minutes now, and I'm starting to do my New York thing of like, and Sharon just goes to the garbage man in the car, and she just says, may you be safe, may you be happy, may you be healthy, may you be right in the street. And I said, Sharon, really? So I think she's walking it like she's talking it. It's very beautiful. Anyhow, just wanted to share that.
Can we talk a little bit about practice? When we talk about, and His Holiness says, kindness is my only religion. Can we talk about putting into effect on a day-to-day basis? And I suppose, we are talking about compassionate mindfulness. Maybe you can expand on that, Sharon.
Well, I think, that as a practice, ultimately it's actually based on being able to pay attention. What are you all doing? Differently. So rather than seeing the practice as something where we're trying to presume a feeling we don't really have, or being hypocritical or covering over maybe some really difficult feelings, I really do see it as paying attention differently. So it's like this bold little experiment to check out what happens. So, for example, if you are the kind of person who tends to evaluate yourself at the end of the day, like, how did I do today? And if you are the kind of person who pretty well only remembers and even fixates on the mistakes you made and the problems you had and the way you didn't show up the way you had hoped to, and all of that. It's almost like, what happens if I like change the channel for a little bit and wish myself well? It doesn't mean you're perfect. It doesn't mean you're going to overlook the problems, but that obsession we tend to have with what's wrong with me and with others, is something we can challenge. And that's what we do with the phrases. Or if you think about all the many, many beings we encounter, we don't really look at, we look through, we kind of objectify or discount. Maybe somebody we even meet now and then, works in some store we go to a lot, but we don't ever really relate to them as a person, and through silently, assuming you're in the store, for sure, silently, uh, repeating those phrases, that David just described, it's like we're actually looking at them instead of through them. And you see what happens, what emerges out of that. And certainly there are all the many, many occasions where we're maybe talking to somebody and we're not really there. And so we're not really connecting. We're thinking about the email we need to write, or you're looking around the room thinking, who would I rather be talking to? Or like anybody. Um, and if you realize that and you sort of make the mental gesture, which is exactly what we do in meditation practice, of gathering your energy and coming back and returning, then you're creating the conditions where a connection can actually arise. And so that's what the metta, metta means loving kindness. That's what the loving kindness practice actually does. That's how it functions. And so sometimes people get really squeamish, like I'm going to have to, act like I really care when I don't, at all. And it's not like that.
Yeah. Important point, I would say.
You just can't explain this stuff better than that. So listen carefully and read Sharon's books. If you're interested in the loving kindness practice, she's the throne holder of it. I just want to add one thing to it, which is these things are sometimes mushy and kind of touchy-feely. And so the element of precision, at Dharma Moon, we have this threefold logic that we really got from Pema, Sharon, which is gentleness, precision, and letting go. Those three, we really move through those three parameters.
Say that again, Dave.
Gentleness, precision, and letting go, which is from a chapter by Pema Chodron in The Wisdom of No Escape. So I think what Sharon, I don't want to turn this into a love poem to you, but it's happening. Is the mix of gentleness and precision, which is what I so much admire in her speech. You can talk about these things and you try to get some vague sense of, what does it mean to wish people well? And is it hokey pokey, and is it kind of gooey and not clarifying and not precise and not accurate and not genuine, not authentic? But the precision element is in what the way Sharon is expressing this. I really admire it. So I just want to say that.
Oh, thank you. And actually, I wasn't thinking about me, but I was thinking about the Dalai Lama, in that, you and I, David, and Raghu also actually have been to many teachings together, listening to the Dalai Lama. And there's something about when you observe him, a kind of naturalness to his presence and loving kindness toward others. I don't ever get the feeling that he's sitting there thinking, God, you are boring, but I am the Dalai Lama, so I have to act like, I really want to listen. There's just something so alive in that. And that's really the state we're talking about, being able to cultivate.
Well, that's good. I'm the Dalai Lama, so I better act like that. That's funny. I wonder if he thinks that way.
Right. The secret underneath.
Sharon, you remember one time, this is a long time back, retreats that we were doing in Maui, and someone brought up, or you were speaking to rather, the concept of love, which is difficult for us. So we're so used to the transactional definition of that word. And Do you remember what you said? Well, it's hard to talk about. You don't. I'm going to remind you. Talk about love. It's difficult because people think it's weak. I'll never forget that.
Mm-hmm.
You remember that? Talk about that. And it was in relation to loving awareness.
Well, I think in terms of, say, loving awareness or teaching loving kindness, and I'm sure David can speak to this as well. I find that there are two major controversies I've encountered. One is the idea that to be loving is to be weak. Just like you said, Raghu, it's stupid, it's sentimental, it's going to mean you're going to lose all intensity, you're not going to be able to take a stand, you're just going to be a pushover. And which, of course, we don't believe nor experience. And the other controversy is I see or I've experienced as a kind of East-West divide. I find that in the West, there's often a concept that the amount of love or compassion we are capable of is a given. We're kind of static or stuck. And if you don't have any, you're out of luck. But in the Eastern philosophies, certainly within, say, Buddhist teaching, absolutely it's believed we can cultivate these strengths, we can grow them, we can develop them, we can train them, in effect, because these are emergent properties of how we pay attention. And if we pay attention differently, we know that's what meditation practice actually is learning how to pay attention differently. These qualities, which, might have been in so much short supply in our lives because of our background or conditioning or whatever, they can grow. They do grow. They flower, that they get unaccountably stronger, for us. And so in terms of the first, I would often think about, as I've said many times, like amongst my friends who met Neem Karoli Baba, for example, as an exemplar of love, people all these years later don't seem to be looking back and thinking, God, what a weak guy, like sort of pathetic. I was young then, so I thought of it one way, but now I see, it was like total waste. I mean, it's the singular experience everyone all these years later refers to as, I saw there was a power of love that I hadn't quite imagined before. And that stayed, so it's really not at all a weakness as we look at it in our lives. It's a tremendous strength.
David actually referred, we keep talking about loving kindness and metta, and here we are with you. How about right here and now leading us in a little bit of metta practice? Would be great.
Sure. So it is its own methodology in one aspect. You can also talk about it as loving awareness whenever you are doing some kind of awareness practice or just living with more awareness. But as a meditation, it's also its own methodology, so it's usually done through, as Raghu described, the silent repetition of certain phrases, and not only toward others, but toward oneself as the foundation. And so we silently repeat these phrases as gift giving, as offering, as blessing. Things like, may I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease or ease of heart. And then we make that offering to others. So if you want to just sit comfortably, close your eyes or not, however you feel most at ease. Let your energy just kind of settle into your body. And begin repeating those phrases, or maybe you have other phrases that are more meaningful to you, as gift giving, as offering to yourself. May I be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease of heart. You don't have to try to create or fabricate any special feeling. Just gather all your attention behind one phrase at a time. Repeat the phrases over and over again with enough space and enough silence so that it's a rhythm that's pleasing to you. This is really like the song of the heart. And see if you can think of somebody we call a benefactor, someone who's helped you. Maybe they've helped you directly, or they've inspired you from afar. The texts say, this is the one who, when you think of them, you smile. You think of them and it just kind of lifts your spirits. Could be an adult, could be a child, could be a pet. Is there someone who just has you smile? And if so, you can bring them here, get an image of them or say their name to yourself, get a feeling for their presence, and offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. May you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease of heart. Even if the words aren't perfect, you're carrying the heart's energy, so they're serving us. And think of someone you know who's struggling right now. They're having a hard time one way or another. Bring them here. See what happens as you offer the phrases of loving kindness to them. May you be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease of heart. And then all beings everywhere, all people, all creatures, all those in existence, near and far, known and unknown. May all beings be safe, be happy, be healthy, live with ease of heart. And when you feel ready, you can open your eyes or lift your gaze and we'll end the meditation.
Thank you, Sharon. As the theme is around harmonizing, I have to think that metta practice in relation to inner harmonizing as well as outer harmonizing is probably, I would hope everybody would take this away from this retreat and be able to continue that practice, because there is so much disharmony outside ourselves, but there's plenty of it inside ourselves. So to be able to turn, may I be happy, may I be peaceful, may I be healthy, as well as may all beings, is extremely important. I just want to quote something from His Holiness around compassion. And it's characterized by someone who, the book is called The Wisdom of Compassion. And this particular piece is taken from Educating the Heart. And the bottom line, as he says, as the Dalai Lama has said, it does not matter whether people are beautiful and friendly or unattractive and hard to get along with. The bottom line is that they are human beings just like us. And like us, they crave happiness and do not want to suffer. Moreover, their right to overcome suffering and be happy is not less than ours. If we can internalize this universal truth, we should automatically feel empathy for them. It is through habituating our minds to this all-encompassing altruism that we develop a sense of responsibility for others. We ingrain within us the wish to help others overcome their difficulties. For the Dalai Lama, this aspiration is uniformly applied to all without discrimination. And if you've heard him or read anything about his relationship with the Chinese after what has been done to the Tibetans, is absolutely, you do not detect any animosity whatsoever. So he is living what he is speaking to. Dave, I kind of want to ask you, I was always interested, what is Trungpa Rinpoche's, what is his take when we're speaking to this kind of compassion?
So, of course, that question has many aspects to to a legitimate response. Fundamentally, first thought, best thought, is that he would say aggression, which is the rejection, it's the opposite of what you talked about, is adharmic fundamentally. That undermines and undercuts any attempt to have a dharmic perspective, is the need to push away, to conquer, to dominate, to manipulate from your perspective. So that's sort of saying what it isn't. Then we heavily emphasized, and Pema Chodron took this piece forward from Trungpa Rinpoche's teachings. And I think if people don't maybe know these lineages, Pema is a hugely popular Buddhist teacher. How many of you have read a book by Pema Chodron? Yeah, I mean,
That's great. If you haven't, please.
yeah, and she was a student of Trungpa Rinpoche also. And she took out of, I think he presented a very wide array of teachings, almost overwhelming to contemplate. Different aspects of the three yanas, the different teachings. And Pema pulled out of that the Tonglen practice, just as Sharon has, in my mind, has pulled out the metta practice and kind of achieved a mastery of presenting that. So we did practice extensive Tonglen in our community. And it's
Maybe just
Yeah,
a little explanation on
so metta, I was thinking as you were talking, Sharon, is the bridge really between the Theravadan tradition and the Mahayana traditions, where you start to move from the intrapersonal, cultivation of one's own clarity and well-being towards connecting and communicating skillfully and compassionately with others. In the Mahayana tradition, that becomes highlighted big time. So you really have this Bodhisattva tradition, which is what the Dalai Lama is really teaching from in this case. So you begin to take on the suffering of others. You notice Sharon didn't say anything about that in the metta prayer. You don't say, oh my goodness, this person's having a difficult time. Let me breathe that into my heart and take that on as mine now. I own that. And in exchange, I will give out basically metta. So you exhale metta and you inhale suffering. So you become a furnace of compassion. And that practice was really emphasized. So, and that's Trungpa Rinpoche, to answer your question. Sharon, does that make sense?
Yeah, it does make sense and very beautifully put. And I would also say, building on what you said, that I think we can make a distinction. And this is also speaking to the kind of squeamishness a lot of people have. We can make a distinction between having a heart and motivation of compassion or loving kindness and the action we take in a moment, so people are often afraid and they ask a million times, like, were I to develop a more loving heart, or were I to develop loving kindness, or in that schema, if I were to give up that aggressiveness, that hostility, does that mean I have to say yes? I have to give them more money. I have to let them move back in. Or I've heard, do I have to visit them in jail, even though the reason they're in jail to begin with is that they harmed me so grievously? And do I have to do this? Does it mean that? And it doesn't mean any of that. And, David used the phrase skillful action. We assess to the best of our ability the skillfulness of an action, what we say, what we do, what we hold back from saying or doing. It's very contextual. It's in the moment. It's this particular being or relationship. And I sometimes call it our best guess of the most skillful thing. It's discernment, and you can have a tremendously loving motivation, truly, and compassionate motivation. And your best guess of the way to respond to something in the moment is kind of fierce, It's intense. It's having a strong boundary. It's saying no. And it doesn't mean that the underlying value is not compassion, So that's, I think, an important and difficult distinction for us also to bear in mind, that skillfulness of action is based on many things.
And since you did invite Trungpa Rinpoche to join the party, he was early on in the translation and importation of these classical dharmas into the West. And so he coined some phrases, I think everybody would agree, that were like seminal in terms of setting the tone. And one of them was a phrase that he coined called idiot compassion. Do you remember that, Sharon? Idiot compassion.
Mm-hmm. I do.
And that is not being compassionate to an idiot. It's trying to be compassionate and being an idiot. In other words, without discernment, which is prajna, which is what Sharon's talking about, without discernment, your skillful means, even if you have a good intention in being compassionate, the analogy I like to use is, somebody's moving a piano out of their apartment, in New York, and you want to help, and you go push it back into their apartment, That's idiot compassion. Do you understand? They're trying to move it out of their apartment, and you think you're helping them, you're pushing it back into their apartment. So without skillful means, without discernment, compassion is sort of hobbled, and not really, even though your heart is open, there's a further cultivation that comes along with it. Fair to say?
Yeah, that's great. I want to just share one other thing from His Holiness the Dalai Lama around compassion that speaks to, again, what we're sharing in this retreat. He said, it's not enough to be compassionate. You must act. And there are two aspects to action. One is to overcome the distortions and afflictions of your own mind. That is, in terms of calming and eventually dispelling anger. And we've been talking about this in terms of practice throughout this retreat. This is action out of compassion. The other is more social, more public. When something needs to be done in the world to rectify the wrongs, if one is really concerned with benefiting others, one needs to be engaged and involved. And he's a perfect example of that in his life, completely engaged with everything that has been going on in his country, obviously, and in the world. He's extraordinary that way. Let's see, we should avail ourselves of sharing with people who want to ask questions, especially we don't have Sharon as much as we want to have Sharon, and we got her right now. So please, whoever would like to ask, not just Sharon, us, anybody, any kind of questions, please come up and we're going to set up the mic and do what we've been doing.
Hello, my name's John. I just caught the end of what Ram Dass said, and it was exactly what I needed to hear. It was, why rush? We have tens of thousands of lifetimes. My question, something that I saw Maharaj-ji say on my Instagram page, because I see him quite a lot on Instagram, which is nice, is spirituality without submission is just entertainment. Can you speak to that?
Submission?
Yeah.
I heard Maharaj-ji say, did you say
Maybe
that's
surrender.
a quote from from Neem Karoli Baba?
That's what Instagram says.
Okay.
So we all know how reliable that is.
Maharaj-ji would never say anything like that, ever. Okay, and unfortunately there are people that either are interpreting something they read or they're attributing it to him. It is unfortunate, but it's out there.
Well, it really resonated with me, if he said it or not. It's just in the sense of we have so much time, and I'm sure I speak for everyone. The world is extremely overwhelming, and I always feel as if I'm running out of time. So to rush feels in opposition of surrender or submission. So when I feel I'm surrendering, especially when I'm in alignment with what's going on here, I feel much better. So maybe you could speak to that.
Yeah, this is actually, something for you guys to speak to as well. But Ram Dass had a close Indian brother named K.K. Shah. He's right here on the puja table. And he came to the retreat once, and we talked about surrender. And before he came, he said, unfortunately, people in the West don't really have an idea of what we mean in the bhakti tradition of what surrender is, and it's called sharanagati. And he actually said it's the last stage before complete freedom, is being able to completely depend on, he put it like if you were in a desert and you had no water and suddenly you came upon a well. This was your whole focus, was that, to be quenched. And he compared that to what we are doing in terms of our lives and practice and becoming whole and balanced. It's a process of continuing to let go, into let go of the tremendous amount of stuff that we are attached to on a day-to-day basis, including our thoughts, the story we tell ourselves. And ultimately, little by little, as our friend Krishnadas says, little by little, it starts to happen. And we become less we're not clinging the way that we did before. And not reacting the way that we usually do on a day-to-day basis. That is surrender. Submission it's kind of a weird word.
Yeah, I agree.
But surrender is also, because we think we've got to give up all our money, we got to give up this, we got to give up, the kind of yellow journalistic way in which that word is used, especially related to spiritual practice. What do you think?
Well, as you do, I was not checking my email, everybody, just to be clear. But I was looking for a quote. I was looking for a quotation, since we do have an atmosphere here in which, in the Tibetan tradition, we would say we've invited the dralas, the kind of
What?
Dralas,
Drala.
D-R-A-L-A. And these are, teachers and beings that are supportive of this kind of communion. And so the atmosphere that when we're drawing down the quote from the Dalai Lama or Neem Karoli Baba, it's like they're here, if you can get that sort of sense of presence. So I just wanted to, and of course, my lineage is Trungpa Rinpoche, so, and he was kind of mentioned. So I just wanted to read a quote that I think ties in handily to what we've been exploring here together. Meditation is not a matter of withdrawing. You're not drawing in or retreating from the world. In fact, you're getting into the world, which is exactly what you were saying. Meditation is a way of developing clarity, which allows us to see the precision of daily life situations, as well as our thought process, so that we can relate with both of them fully and completely, both our thought process and our life situation, inner and outer. Everyday practice, and here's the payload for how we can bring this to fruition. The everyday practice is simply to develop a complete acceptance and openness to all situations and emotions, and to all people, experiencing everything totally without mental reservations and blockages, so that one never withdraws or centralizes into oneself. And that I would offer as a definition of surrender, but not submission.
Right.
Thank you.
You.
Hey everyone, I'm Nick.
Hi, Nick.
I've hit what feels like a plateau in my metta practice, and I was hoping that you could either help me overcome it or maybe reframe it in my mind. When I'm going about my day and not in sitting meditation, I find that my measurement mind, which in relationship to humans is often judgmental, arises before my metta mind. And so often it feels like I have a judgmental thought, my awareness arises, and then my metta mind arises. And I'm looking for a way to get past that, where my metta mind and my awareness come first.
Sharon?
Well, it's funny because sometimes, first of all, I wouldn't worry about it, and I don't think you need to get past it. You know, when I describe doing loving kindness while walking, which is a lot of what you're saying, out in the world, encountering different people. The example I use is actually, you know, maybe I'm walking down the street in New York and I see somebody, and the first thing that arises in my mind is, that's the wrong jacket for this season. And then I cap it with a little metta, which is exactly what you're describing, but I find amusement in it. And I think it's fine, you know, like, rather than seeing, rather than kind of concretizing these thoughts, you know, and making them more solid than they actually are, and then judging ourselves for them, like they're bad, they're awful. It's realizing, oh yeah, that's just conditioning. That's going to arise. Look at that. I don't have to grab onto it. I don't have to take it to heart. I don't have to build a self-image around it. I don't have to decide this is who I really am. You know, it's like, yeah, that's a really stupid thing to be wearing. Be happy. You know, and I think it's just natural and it's fine.
Thank
Good
you.
bumper sticker, Sharon. That's a stupid thing to wear. Be happy.
That's right. Merch.
You know, that reminds me a little of that book, Altered Traits, I think it is, Tsoknyi Rinpoche.
Danny Goleman?
No, Danny, How to Meditate with Danny. Yeah, Danny Goleman.
Yeah.
It talked about reification. You prompted that thought in my mind, how we do that. We just make things so real at the expense of groundedness, shall we say. Hi,
Hi, my name is Mukti.
Mukti.
Hi. Sharon, thank you for the metta practice.
Closer to the mic.
Sharon, thank you for the metta practice. It was really beautiful. I can't believe I'm standing here. It's intimidating. It was the last two quotes that you shared, Raghu, and spirit just brought me to my feet. Would you share the one before skillful action again, please?
Sure. The bottom line is everyone is human. We are all human beings. And everyone is just like us. We have a wonderful meditation that we did for many years with Mirabai Bush, just like me. We have to kind of figure out how to do that tomorrow. And like us, they crave happiness and do not want to suffer. Moreover, their right to overcome suffering and be happy is not less than ours. If we can internalize this universal truth, we should automatically feel empathy for them. It is through habituating our minds to this all-encompassing altruism that we develop a sense of responsibility for others. We ingrain within us the wish to help others overcome their difficulties.
Thank you. So my question, I've been holding this question throughout Spring's offering this morning and for the last couple of years. And the second quote was about skillful action. My question is to all of you, to Sharon, to David, to all of you, how should we take skillful action when it seems that we have not yet fully purified the anger and righteousness in our hearts? Sometimes I feel paralyzed, like this analysis paralysis of judging. Is this skillful action? I feel reactive in my action rather than responsive.
Get it. We are all doing that in this season now, are we not? In relation to the really divisive polarization that we're in. Sharon, why don't you address that?
Well, I know it is real and complicated, those kinds of situations and that experience. But I wouldn't wait to be fully purified, for anything. I mean, motives are often mixed, and sometimes we realize there's like too much aggression in us. There's too much hostility. We're not seeing clearly. It's hard to see what's skillful sometimes in those situations because our own reactivity is taking over. And so sometimes you just have to wait, breathe or put the pause button on for a moment, as you kind of recalibrate some steadiness of attention. And also sometimes in a mixed motive, we can pick out the quality that we really value, that we see impatience, and also compassion cooking within us. And even, and it's not like lecturing yourself, but it's even reminding yourself, what do I really want to see come out of this situation? Do I want to denounce them and have them feel horrible, or do I want a resolution? And you just ask yourself the question, what do I really want to see? Or what do I care about most right now? Is it winning or is it being kind? And it brings us to wisdom we already have, that we can then bring forth and have it inform our action as best we can. And sometimes silence is the best thing,
Or as your close friend forever, Jack Cornfield, who has come to the retreats for a long time in Maui, especially with his wife Trudy. And whenever he would talk about, getting into a situation where this reactivity is just pulling you in a way that, and you start to enjoy it a little bit too, because it makes us feel right. He would just go, "It's okay to be human. It's okay." And that's a good mantra too, I think.
Yeah, thank you. In the atmosphere of social justice and healing justice, it's really complicated to not get sucked in to the idea that we're doing something right.
Absolutely, 100%.
Could I add one thing to you, Mukti? Your portfolio, your lunchbox
Yes, please.
at home. That is what we used to call, and I think Raghu is going to be able to resonate, this show called the $64 question. That's the big question for this retreat, exactly what you've nailed there.
$64,000.
No, okay, now you're really letting me down. Because it was originally the $64 question, and then due to inflation, the next incarnation of that television show was the $64,000 question. But all kidding aside, how can we help the world if we are not Buddha, not even a qualified Bodhisattva, not even a skilled practitioner, not even a kind of processed person? And, this is where, and I think Sharon and Raghu might add something to this, we have something we call bodhicitta, which is important to bring into this conversation. Right, Sharon? Bodhicitta. And it's the awakened heart. And we have two dimensions to it. That this is where I think the Buddhists can help a little bit by delineating some things. There's called absolute bodhicitta, which means you have it already. It's there. You are purified. You are blessed. You are good. You are, ready, whatever you want to say, by nature. Buddha nature, sometimes. Then there's the beauty of that. If you say that, then people go, well, okay, I don't have to do anything, right? That could be a misunderstanding of that. And then we have the relative bodhicitta, which is the cultivation of the qualities gradually over time that are radiating from the absolute nature. And we work on both at the same time. So the metta practice is a relative bodhicitta practice. But and Sharon, correct me if I'm wrong about this, okay? You do it with the view of the fundamental nature being already intact and good. You touch in on absolute bodhicitta. This is the way I learned it. You touch it by ringing a bell, by having a moment of presence and taking a breath. Then you move to the relative practice. By integrating those two, here's the last thing I'm going to say. They're considered to be, in the highest teaching, inseparable. You cannot separate absolute bodhicitta from relative bodhicitta. They are, the third iteration of it is they are inseparable, and you must work on both at the same time. You recognize absolute bodhicitta, you cultivate relative bodhicitta.
Thank you.
Very good, David, very good. As Krishna says, gradually but inevitably it will come. This is it. Well, last question.
Thank you.
Sorry, but we have to go to lunch or something.
My name is Ryan. Thank you so much, first of all, to all the teachers and all the participants for creating a space of healing. That's what I'm here for. That's what I'm always at these types of retreats for, is to heal. And since we have Sharon on the line, who's essentially the queen of kindness and the metta practice, I want to take this opportunity. I'm gonna try to get through this without crying, but when you've been hurt so bad, when someone that you love has been hurt so bad, and you try to forgive the person that hurt that person, you pray on it, you meditate on it, and it blocks you, and you just can't seem to forgive the person. Specifically, my daughter was hurt, and the person that hurt her is no longer here. He's gone. So that blocks me from God. I love Jesus Christ, and he's the Prince of Peace. And he showed us, even as he was being killed, that he was forgiving in the act of being killed. I can't do that yet. So if you could give me any kind of advice, Sharon, or us, because I imagine other people in the room have similar circumstances, please do.
Well, I've always found forgiveness a hard word, hard concept, because it can mean so many different things to different people. As one of my friends, my colleague, Sylvia Borstein, would always say, forgiveness does not mean amnesia. It doesn't mean what happened didn't matter, doesn't matter still, but we kind of maybe think it does, but it's really like what you're talking about. It's like there can be a way that someone else's terrible action can take over our lives forever in a way that we're haunted by it, rather than reclaiming our lives and being able to express love, toward others and have a sense of vitality. Like I've worked fair amount with people who are survivors of gun violence, and some people lost their children in a school shooting or something like that. And it's a very powerful question, like what does it mean to be able to go on? Some of them have surviving children, they want to be good parents. They want to be really present. They want to reclaim the life and the memory of their child and have it be significant in the world, not have their child be forgotten. And we can't do that when we are overtaken by the terrible actions of another. So there's some kind of release inside that's not amnesia, and it's not discounting what happened, but it is more freeing ourselves, and that is possible for us. I mean, I also feel like some of the most profound acts of what I would call forgiveness I've heard or seen in people who refuse to use the word forgiveness. Like I was teaching once in Israel, and somebody was there in the retreat who clearly was in a lot of physical discomfort all the time. He was always like wiggling and moving. And my colleague who was there with me gave a talk on forgiveness. So he didn't like that. And he came up to complain to me about her talk. And he said to me, I was in a terrorist attack. My body is full of shrapnel. I'm in pain all of the time. And he said, I'll never forgive, but what I've learned is absolutely essential is to learn to stop hating. And I thought, I'll take that, man, like hating actively, continuously, it ruins your own life. And again, even further. And the other time was I was in the Holocaust Museum in Washington, D.C. And the very last thing one hears is this kind of video testimony of people who were there then, usually as children. And this one woman was speaking about being a child in the Holocaust and losing her whole family. And she said, at the very end of her statement, she said, I brought up my children to love and not to hate, but I will never forgive. And that was the last thing I heard, before I walked out the door. And I thought, yeah, you don't have to call it forgiveness. It's pretty incredible to bring up your children to love and not to hate. So I think those kinds of experiences in fits and starts and ebbs and flows and are absolutely available to us. As difficult as it is, it's like step by step, we can actually achieve that as long as we understand, what we're aiming for and not some kind of, it also reminds me, I'll say this last thing because I know you all want to go to lunch. I wrote a book some years ago called Real Love and turned it in to the publisher and got like an away message. I'm on vacation or something for a few weeks. And when I heard finally from my publisher, he said, I really liked the book. My favorite part was when you quoted Joan Halifax saying something like, don't try to force yourself to think of the traumas of your life as gifts. Think of them as givens. In other words, don't try to push yourself into a situation like, I'm so grateful this happened. Some people get there, but they get there naturally. But what we really need is a state of this happened. Now what? Now how am I going to manifest love in this world? And so, of course, it was very funny for me because my first thought was, wow, his favorite part of my book wasn't even something I wrote. It was something Joan wrote, But I kind of agreed with him. That was my favorite part, too.
That's good. All right. Thank you.
Thank you, everybody. We're at the end. Thank you, Sharon.
Thank you. Thank you all.